Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Adita Karkera, Chief Data Officer for Deloitte's Government and Public Services. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Alan Sim, the Chief Data Officer for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. Alan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Adita, and really appreciate the opportunity to share.
We're so excited to have you, Alan, and I have so many questions lined up for you out of my curiosity for the work you do and lead at CDC. But maybe if you would get started with telling us a little bit about your background. I've been doing some reading, and I've just been really enamored with everything that you've been doing before you got to the CDC. So maybe you could start off with that for us, please.
Sure, absolutely. I think I'm a little bit different than many of my CDO peers. My background's actually in epidemiology and in public health. And, I started my career, it looks like exactly 25 years ago at CDC. I was one of the early classes, one of the early members of the Public Health Informatics Fellowship. So really looking at the application of informatics, IT in public health, and really opened my eyes to really fantastic things. At the time, we were dealing with bioterrorism. We were dealing with trying to integrate our multiple disease surveillance systems, health data standards and terminology. So ironically, I didn't know at that time, but a lot of those themes and a lot of the activities that I was involved with 25 years ago would come back again, just like fashion a couple of decades later. The bulk of my career has been with the Department of Defense, first Air Force, then Defense Health Agency. I was really privileged to work with fantastic leadership and fantastic analytical teams. We managed what's called the Military Health System Population Health Portal. We developed disease registries for the entire Department of Defense. Over 3 million beneficiaries, access to essentially the electronic health record for the DoD, and created these patient registries as well as providing analytic support and reports. The last 5 years there at the Defense Health Agency, I was asked to lead a data innovation team. And so the focus there was on advanced data analytics, predictive analytics, application of data science, clinical decision support to address some of the major issues at the time, such as opioid prevention, opioid abuse, and again, using the lessons learned from the population health activities that we were involved with and applied them using the latest technologies and methods. So because of that wealth of experience and my history with CDC, I was very fortunate to be asked to join CDC in December 2020 to become CDC's first Chief Data Officer. And I've been in this role for approximately the past 2.5 years.
Well, Alan, what a fantastic background. Thank you for sharing those details with us and the audience. Now, in your role as the CDC CDO, can you talk a little bit about where your role is positioned within the organization and what some of your key responsibilities are? And I ask that because, the federal government has had many CDOs offices being established recently. But as I talk to them every day, it seems like there are slight differences in each of their roles and responsibilities aligned to that organization's mission and culture. So I'm curious, what are your key priorities, your roles, responsibilities, and where you are in the organization?
No, that's very perceptive. I mean, I think, as you indicated, it's reflective of the organization's culture and goals, right? And so I currently I administratively sit within the Office of the Chief Information Officer. So I report to CDC's CIO, Susie Connor. At the same time, CDC is in the middle of a reorganization. And so There's a new center that's been created called the Office of Public Health Data Surveillance and Technology, or OFITS. And so with the focus on public health data strategy, there's discussions about potential transition to that new center. Nonetheless, my role as CDO will continue. But to your earlier point, what exactly is my role? When I first entered, I recognized that there would be lots of opinions of what I should be doing. So I made it, I felt it was really important to communicate my role as a data diplomat to a lot of my peers. I didn't want them to think that I was trying to take operational control of what they're doing. I wasn't going to be a data czar, but I felt the term data diplomat suggested that best suggested that I would take a role where I would represent them. I would represent the community in interacting with other partners, addressing critical issues, but also highlighting often the work that's being done that unfortunately sometimes gets buried under layers of bureaucracy. So I stood up the Enterprise Data Office. There are three pillars, three priority areas that I focused on when I stood up the office. Those things are, no surprise here, enterprise analytics and data science. And so how can we leverage machine learning and AI, but also be aware of the risks? So we're thinking of developing an AI strategy for the agency. And a lot of my colleagues have been discussing a specific paper. They've already shared this in terms of conversational and generative AI and the risks and responsibilities associated with those technologies. So that was one pillar, enterprise analytics and data science. Another pillar is what I call strategy and enterprise data management. And I link those two intentionally. Sometimes we get caught up on master data management, data quality, all the principles of data management, but we don't align it to the business outcome, and hence the word strategy. So what do we care about at CDC? What are the key outcomes that we care about as it relates to the public health data strategy? And so one of the activities related to that is development of an enterprise data catalog. And so we've been pushing out this catalog to encourage our centers, institutes, and offices to begin cataloging their data, because it's, especially in government, really difficult to have visibility about all the data assets that we have in the agency. And if we have standardized metadata, a standard way of cataloging, that gives visibility in terms of what data we have. It doesn't solve harmonization of data sets. It doesn't solve redundancy, but it's the first step, right? Just having transparency about our data assets. And then the third pillar, the final pillar that often gets overlooked, is data governance and policy. What are those data use agreements, those MOAs, the legal frameworks that allow for data sharing? Sometimes we get enamored with the concept of open data, but if a specific agreement says only Adita can have access to this data and do things with it, as much as I would like to share it with others, I can't, right? And so that team is looking at things like data standards. They're looking at newer ways to write our agreements and frameworks that allow for reuse while still protecting confidentiality and ensuring that only those who have a need to know gain access. So those are the three major pillars of the Enterprise Data Office, which I think are good themes in terms of the kinds of activity, kinds of work that we're doing to support the agency.
Thank you, Alan. That I think was super useful for not only me, but also for the audience that's listening to kind of understand a large organization as CDC and your very strategic focus on how you're organizing your office into those three pillars is absolutely phenomenal. As a follow-up, I know you touched a little bit about this when you talked about your third pillar around data governance, the challenges with data sharing and the data sharing usage agreements. I know those are a couple of the challenges that I've heard other CDOs talk about as well. Are there other things that you want to highlight around how you're mitigating some of these data sharing challenges and how you are operationalizing data governance for CDC?
Yeah, I think data governance is always a challenge. Fortunately, I was involved with data governance 25 years ago, and what I learned from that time period is that especially in government, to do a big bang approach, right? Kind of a waterfall method to try to implement data governance is extremely challenging, and you generally don't have consensus, and the progress that you make is very minimal, but you've expended a large amount of resources across the agency. And so the approach that at least I've chosen to take is really breaking things out into domains of work, whether it's domains of data or various initiatives where you have communities that are very invested in the particular data sets that they care about. For example, lab or case or so on and so forth. And when you have those communities who are really invested in the data products that are being generated there, you have a higher chance of finding commonality and consensus, doing it in an iterative way. And so we did stand up a data standards management and harmonization working group to partner with the different pockets of data standards activity across the agency. We've also partnered with the Office of National Coordinator, ONC, on US CDI and some of the industry standards that we're trying to help adopt. But really, in terms of data governance, we're trying to work with those various communities. And we have something called IT and data governance. And IT and data governance is focused both on our investments as well as the way that we implement architecture. We have something called the architecture review team that really evaluates the design and ensures that we have consistency in how we implement our data and architecture sort of projects. So I wouldn't say we've solved the data governance challenges, but I think we have a good foundation in terms of ITDG. And I've noticed a cultural shift where our different siloed programs are more invested in trying to think of ways to do things in an enterprise manner.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing that. I mean, as a large organization as CDC, I can only imagine the challenges that you face bringing around data governance at a scale. Thank you so much for sharing those as well as all of the insights today. I know we could continue the conversation for much longer, but for today, thank you so much for making time. And for the audience, please continue to visit us at cdomagazine.tech for further interviews. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adita. Appreciate it.